Okay, so alright, so good day class. So today we're going to discuss about part 2 of the specialized architectural services. So last time we stopped at acoustics. Then today we're going to start from site development planning. Okay, this is one of the specialized architectural services. So let's read what's written here. So the space planning, architectural layouting, and utilization of spaces within and surrounding a specific building, structure in relation with existing natural and or built environments have to be a well-coordinated effort so that both the building and structure and the host environment shall act as one. Okay, so it should be one system. So the buildings and the environment we're going to place in its context. Arising from his concept of the total environment, the architect is not merely concerned with the building or structure he creates, but with the grounds and surrounding space as well. He studies the existing environment in relation to the building, structure, and consequently lays out the areas, grounds immediately surrounding the building or structure. So ordinarily, the landscaping layout of small buildings could be done by the architect as part of the site development planning or SDP effort. However, if the project is too large, the architect must hire other state-regulated professionals as qualified specialist consultants. So this is where the landscape architects would come in and the environmental planners would come in because this era class in architecture it's more on collaboration. So as we move uh, as our country develops further, as technology improves, we need to move towards the direction of collaboration with other professionals so that the projects that we do will be uh, successful. It's not just the work of one person but the collaboration of different disciplines. Okay, so these are the scope of services. So the architect conceptualizes the entire site development plan or STP, including the generic scope of civil works and the general scope of softscape and hardscape requirements. So he also conceptualizes the specifications for the needed civil works and utility lines and assists the owner client in bidding out the work or negotiating with landscape, waterscape, rock formations, contractors, etc. But mainly when no SC is available or specialized consultants SC class. Then site development planning services. So the architect may enter into uh, contract with the owner in two ways. So this is the same as uh, our previous discussion, which is in working in dual capacity as architect of record and consulting architect, or working as uh, consulting architect for site development services only. Okay, so the manner of compensation, so the architect's fee for site development planning services shall depend on the estimated cost of the civil works and landscaping works. For example, the hardscape and softscape, depending on the magnitude and complexity of the work required by the project. So if the architect is also certified and licensed as a separate registered licensed professional, for example, landscape architect or environmental planner, and is suitably inexperienced, the architect's fee shall increase correspondingly depending on the magnitude and complexity of the work required by the project. So, should the owner or the client separately engage the services of a landscape architect, the fee of the said specialist consultant shall be for the account of the owner and paid directly to the specialist consultant. So, I think it's quite difficult naman if you're going to be the one to pay for their fees as well. So for the specialized service, the payment of the architect services shall be as stated in the architect's guidelines. Then we have site and physical planning. So the keywords here is orderly arrangement, visionary interrelationships, and going beyond. So if the architect is commissioned to do physical plans for a specific site, He has to go beyond the study of human behavior and activities and must undertake an in-depth study of the host site's economic systems, its laws and regulations, tax structure, infrastructure, utilities, and other components that will have a bearing on the project. Okay. So for example, class in this context, this is a large-scale physical planning activity. So I think for projects at this size, you'd really require na you go for the environmental planners for this one so that um, they could provide you a much more detailed planning and analysis of the different laws of the different uh, urban design problems and concerns. Okay, so physical planning is concerned with the general quality of the settings for people and their activities. So it also deals with arrangement, and then should other services be required by the project such as environmental studies, feasibility studies, market analysis, access movement systems, impact analysis, and others. Said services should be performed by duly qualified professionals with the architect acting as the lead professional of the physical planning team. So depending on the complexity of the project, the architect may hire additional specialized consultants whose expert or advice may be needed to validate certain features of the physical plan. The fee of any additional specialized consultants needed in the project must be paid separately by the client. Okay. But I'm my advice for your class is that you should detail this also in the contract. Okay. So in the contract, you must explain to your client as well that if there are additional consultants needed for the project, then their fees should be paid by the client and not be taken from your professional fee. So it should be clear from the contract. So before you engage the client class, always make sure that you have a design contract with them. Okay? Before you engage in construction, you should always have a construction contract with them also. So just to avoid problems in semantics. Because it will be troublesome if you don't communicate with your clients on these details. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So when the architect is commissioned to do physical planning for building sites such as industrial buildings or estates, commercial or religious, institutional and government civic centers, sports complexes, tourist centers, tourism estates, resorts or amusement parks, educational facilities, housing subdivisions, and the like, the the architect confers with the owner or client on the project requirements, secure sufficient primary and secondary data to generate reliable projections and analysis, which are to be used as basis for the preparation of physical plans or designs. Then examines laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations affecting the project, code searches, and considers the best industry practices applicable. Then prepares framework and conceptual master development plans and reports from relevant information gathered by other disciplines. So the architect also prepares preliminary up to detailed master development plans, prepares the SP, SPPCC for the total physical development, undertakes modifications, revisions, and changes as may be required by the owner or client and the project within the engagement period, prepares the finalized plans, reports, and specifications needed for approval by the owner or client for proper government agencies concerned, prepares the phasing of the construction and the concurrence of the owner or client, then prepares project cost estimates based on current cost parameters. So, like the other specialized architectural services class, we could also do this as dual capacity. as architect of record and consulting architect, or as consulting architect only for the site and physical planning services. So the manner of compensation is also based on the architect's guidelines. So we have here comprehensive development planning, or CDP. So, comprehensive development planning services are based on the concept of expanding physical planning services to include other activities necessary for the proper handling of the numerous components in the formulation, implementation, and realization of a master development plan. Comprehensive development planning covers the range of all services from primary data gathering through the formulation of the NDP and the parallel preparation of the environmental impact assessment statement, which is your IEA or IEAS or IES, environmental impact statement. Then, while the planning team is multidisciplinary, the CDP services may place heavy emphasis on the non-physical, non-engineering components of the development plan. For example, the financial, economic, or the market demand, the forecast, the administrative, political, institutional, legal, socio-cultural, environmental, and the like. In contrast, MDP services puts a premium on the physical planning and engineering components of the development plan, which are the direct or sequential physical translations of the inputs from the initial stages of the CDP effort. So I guess with this one class, you may need also environmental planners. So if suitably trained and experienced, the architect's ability to synthesize and organize into a whole the various information relating to the user's needs, perceptions, and expectations, site and climatic conditions, construction technology, materials, cost, and other information qualifies him to take the lead role in an undertaking that cuts across various disciplines. So, the consulting architect is concerned with the management and use of land as well as the conservation, preservation, and upgrading of the human environment since the architect, particularly if a separate RLP or for example, the environmental planner with suitable training experience in physical and land use planning has the social commitment and technical expertise as coordinator of several disciplines. He is qualified to lead the multidisciplinary team in offering comprehensive development planning services. Okay, so these are the in the formulation of the comprehensive development plan, these are the following components of it. So we have the physical component, which is the land use and changes which occur within the physical environment, within the space where such activities take place, represented mainly by the MDP. We have the economic component, the nation's assets and its management, the socio-cultural component, the people, their living conditions, and the seeking of ways to ameliorate it. Then we have the transport component, the road and transit networks, land, sea, air linkages, and the movement of people and goods from one place to another. So I think the clue here is the comprehensive development planning. So when you say comprehensive, it encompasses a lot of things. Okay. Then we have the legal and administrative component, which is the relationship of adopted development proposals with regards to existing laws. And you have the comprehensive development planning calls for the detailed study of physical, social, economic, and administrative components such as such requires the expertise and knowledge of specialist consultants. So when the consulting architect is commissioned to do a comprehensive planning development effort, he performs the following: identify existing land use, resources, social behavior and interaction, undertake environmental analysis, demographic analysis, and feasibility studies, examines existing laws, ordinances, political, social constraints, then prepares the conceptual development plans, policies, implementing strategies to arrive at the desired comprehensive and or master planning solutions. Okay, so these are the different examples. So you can see here the development guidelines, the law enforcement, which is the provincial comprehensive, the comprehensive plan, you have the town, then you have the land readjustment, then the policy plan, which emanates from the national to the regional to the sub-regional, the watershed, and to the district. So if you're going to um, if you want to study environmental planning class, these are the things that you must be familiar with. Okay. So it's good that there are a lot of architects now who are also licensed environmental planners. I think it's best to tap them, especially if the projects has this much scope. Of course, for the comprehensive planning, the architect may be dual capacity. He may be the architect of record and the consulting architect, or only as the consulting architect. So the compensation for uh, specialized architectural services through comprehensive development planning is computed through man-months, so 22 man-days multiplied by 8 man-hours and multiplied by a factor to cover the direct and indirect cost overhead as prescribed in the architect's guidelines. So you can read here in the cartoon. So how long will your project take if I add two people? So add 1 month for training, 1 month for the extra complexity, and 1 month to deal with their drama. But after all of that, they'll be useful as this meeting. So I don't know if you find this a funny class. Okay, but I really like Dilbert cartoons. Okay, so when you're like what I've always told my construction project management class, when you are dealing with projects, you're dealing with people. So these people, they have different personalities. Okay, so you shouldn't treat them as spreadsheets. Okay, you to treat them as individuals and look at um, try to look at their best sides so that you'll find out how they're going to best contribute for the project. Okay. Okay, so according to the PowerPoint, let's have a break. So if this was a synchronous uh, meeting or if it was a face-to-face class, um, after the discussion, so after the first 30 slides, you should have a break. But since this is a recorded lecture, so let's continue class. So I really hope that the pandemic would end and I could see you guys in person. Because it's much, for me, it's much easier to teach when you actually see your students and they react to what you are presenting also. So you have historic and heritage conservation and planning. So I think this is really important because even if if we are moving to develop our cities and our towns, we should look at also our culture and heritage. So the suitably trained and experienced consulting architect in this area of architecture practice provides research, assessment, recording, management, interpretation, and conservation of historical heritage. So the consulting architect in this area of practice provides the owner or client with means and measures to ensure the proper function and maintenance of the building or structure and site after final inspection. So what I can advise you class is that if you have projects someday um, and it has a historical significance, you must research on it and try to preserve it. Convince the client to preserve it as much as possible because we should always look at our history because without history we can't move forward. So the architect in this area of practice recommends the systematic process of ensuring that a building, a structure's array of systems is planned, designed, installed, and tested to perform according to the design intent and the building's operational needs. If the building or materials, equipment, and systems are not installed properly or are not operating as intended, the effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, and other benefits of high performance plans or designs will not be achieved. So the architect in this area of practice undertakes a scientific study on the built environment, which allows the architect to focus on the ways in which the buildings can be preserved or itself and prolong its life in a cost-efficient manner, and finally provide recommendations to the client. So the forensic study may include determination as to the causes of the building component or building material deterioration, the causes of observed building deficiencies, for example, the non-compliance with planning and building laws, deviations from the original use or function of spaces, research on possible faulty activities and operations during the post-implementation phase, and determination of faulty plan design and other construction methodology. So that's forensic architecture. So appraisal, okay, so I'm also a licensed real estate appraiser class. Um, you could say that appraisal is defined as as an act or process of estimating value. So the consulting architect in this area of practice places value on the building or structure, conditions and defects, and on its repair and maintenance, including the required improvements. But of course, to make the detailed appraisal reports, you need to be a licensed real estate appraiser. Then you have structural conceptualization. So the architect in this area of practice conceives, chooses, and develops the type, disposition, arrangement, and proportioning of the structural elements of an architectural work. So giving due consideration to safety, cost effectiveness, functionality, and aesthetics. So when you say structural conceptualization, you're just talking about the concepts. Okay. I think it's clearly outlined in RE 9266 that um, the detailed structural analysis of the building should be done by a separate structural engineer. But it does not mean that we architects should not understand structural design. So in fact, we have subjects class in structural design, steel, timber, masonry, and wood when you reach your fourth year or fifth years. Okay, so that's what it means when you say that in architecture you have to use the left and right side of your brain as well. So the consulting architect in this area of practice must have more than basic knowledge. So that's for preliminary services, more than basic knowledge of site analysis, space planning and management, architectural programming, and the other services under SPP document 201. So that's for the preliminary services. So when you say preliminary, okay, so I think it's before you're going to do the final planning of the project. Then you have the post-design services. So the consulting architect in this area of practice must have much more than basic knowledge of pre-construction, construction, post-construction, and other services under SPP documents 204, 206, and 207. So included under this specialized practice is the preparation of the FALAR, which is stated in okay, so included under this practice is the preparation of the fire safety and life assessment report, is the FALAR, required by RA number 9514, the 2008 Fire Code of the Philippines, and its 2009 IRR. Okay, so I think class to become to be able to prepare the FALAR, you must undergo the training prescribed by the Bureau of Fire Protection to become a fire safety practitioner. So though I have forgotten what are the requirements to become a fire safety practitioner, but you could inquire that at your local Bureau of Fire Protection. Uh, agencies in your cities or municipalities. Okay. So that's for the post-design services. When you say post-design, so after the design is there already. Then we have dispute avoidance and resolution. So um, this is quite a messy class, especially if you're dealing with a lot of laws already. So you must be well versed with the different building laws. If you're going to get into this kind of service, the dispute avoidance and resolutions. Okay, so in this architect, the architect in this area of practice must have more than the basic knowledge of the various modes of alternative dispute resolutions prescribed under RA number 9285 and the ADR Act of 2004 and its IRR, construction arbitration, mediation and conciliation, negotiation and of contract administration, quality surveys, appraisals and adjustments, and expert testimony. An architect specializing in ADR must preferably be state accredited. So you have the architectural research methods. So the consulting architect in this area of practice must have more than the basic knowledge of research methods, Philippine architecture and its history, architectural materials and finishes, building types and standards, architectural design trends, architecture writing, and architectural photography. So if you are in the academe, so most architects in the academe, they're into architectural research. So there are different types of research. You could do a quantitative study, you could do a mixed method, or you could do a qualitative one. So it would really depend on what kind of research methods that you are familiar with. So you have the special building facility planning and design. So the architect, this area of practice must have much more than the basic knowledge of the planning and design processes required for housing developments, recreational and tourism estates, healthcare and hospitality facilities, transportation and telecommunications facilities, production and extractive facilities, utility-related developments, secure facilities, business and industrial parks, economic zones, and community architecture and the like. Then you also have the building components. So the consulting architect in this area of practice must have more than the basic knowledge of building materials and finishes, construction methodologies, building envelopes, including cladding and roofing systems, architectural fenestrations or the windows, and architectural hardware fixtures and fittings. Okay. Then you have the management of architectural practice. So the architect in this area of practice must have much more than the basic knowledge. It's always repeated class. The much more than the basic knowledge of the types of architecture office operations, architecture office management, accounting, finance, taxation, audit, labor code, architectural marketing and project development, proposals, negotiations, file management, and limitations of business process outsourcing, BPO, and knowledge process outsourcing operations. So preferably, if you want to get into the management of architectural practice, you should get an MBA or a doctor in business management. Okay, then you have here the general notes. So compensation for the foregoing specialized architectural services, all of which may be classified as extra, additional, or extra services shall be through man-months. So if 22 man-days multiplied by 8 man-hours and multiplied by a factor to cover other direct and indirect costs or overhead or any other applicable mode of determination the architect's fee as stated in documents 201, 202, and the architect's guidelines. Okay, so that's the end of this slide. So I'm glad that we're done with the slides, okay, for the specialized architectural services. So this is just I think for the first part of our semester class, this is just a review of the different um, UAP documents. But when we go to our final term, we're going to discuss more on how you're going to manage your office, the business of architecture itself. Okay, So I hope that you're doing fine, class. If you have any further questions or clarifications, you can reach me anytime. You can send an email or you could send a message in Facebook. Okay, so I'll always respond as long as I'm online and I'm not busy. Okay. Then we'll have a separate synchronous discussion for this one where you can ask me um, anything relating to this topic. Okay, so see you next meeting.